137 This Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
And I'm TK.
And we are coming live because our dear friend TK found this beautiful product. You can see the little watermark up here, StreamYard. Dude, these guys did a great job. Not only recreating or replicating what Hangouts on Air did for us, but dude, this is a way better interface than Google had. Way better.
StreamYard, we will be your pimp for this stuff from now on.
Yeah, as long as this works out, because I'll go back and look at this because I also want to start chopping them up and posting like little clips of questions, answers, and stuff. Dude, I don't have a problem paying $20 a month to get rid of that logo and get some more functionality on here.
Yeah, I don't mind the logo. I mean, I want people.
I don't either.
For killing it, right? I mean, it's to me that's good.
Well, we were talking about this as we were testing this morning, getting warmed up. I'm fascinated by Google's approach of, like, the big example was Google Glass. And, I had said before, and I think I've said on the show before with Dan, I was an early Glass explorer. I wrote that damn essay, poured my heart into it. Then I got the privilege of paying $1,500 for a device that sits in a box now. Museum piece. And they just killed it. And, like, it doesn't exist anymore, except I think in some arcane manufacturing context. But they just dead. No more service. What I see Google doing now, or really Alphabet, that I'm fascinated by is they'll kind of kickstart a service like Hangouts on Air and then abandon it, but leave the APIs open.
Yep.
And then you can get stuff like this. I actually think that's a good, innovative pathway.
I do too. I think Google Glass in particular disappeared. They have an approach to build. My dad used to tell me, because he worked for General Electric for his whole adult life, that they would develop the technology and they would patent it, and then they would just kind of turn it loose and let it go run wild for a while. And then once some company incubated it and figured it out and made it bigger, they would buy it. They would effectively buy it back, and they skip the maturation process.
Right.
And a lot of software companies can do that now. But what I think happened with Google Glass was they didn't. The unintended consequences of backlash of people walking around with what a lot of people just viewed as a pure surveillance device. I'm in a crowd. The expectation of privacy doesn't extend into Walmart, but the expectation of privacy that people wanted to extend into homes and personal conversations. And when people had Google Glass on, I think in some cases it created an adverse reaction. I mean, we had them for a while at Silent Circle because of the relationship we had with Google, and people would get cranked up if you walked into their cubicle and you had them on, right? So I think, again, there's at some point the ability to see data in real time at your eyeball level, so to speak, is here and now. But the concept that people might be able to suck up the zeros and ones of your life like that, Ted, was it Truman
Yeah.
Show or whatever it was, that style? I think that people still aren't ready for that.
No.
But you look at, I think we're in an age where there are especially big software projects that, either industrial or big enterprise goes. Some of this stuff is developed behind the scenes, whether it's by government agencies or big corporations and stuff like that. And it said, hey, if we open source the bulk of our API library, the code base as much as we can, we can maintain the secret sauce for whatever we want to do with it. And now we can have a big global community develop it not only much more quickly, much more efficiently, and much more securely because of the global oversight. Right. And I think that's whether it's StreamYard, Google, or anybody else, they're saying, hey, how many employees can I have for something that ostensibly is part of a suite of tools?
Well, check this out. Tell me what you think about this idea, because I was thinking about this last night when I was testing this setup to make sure it would run smooth on my machine. What this reminds me of is in video games, especially massively multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft, okay? So I think you would agree, most innovative efforts follow like the 80-20 Pareto principle, right?
Yep.
80% of the work takes 20% of the time, 20% of the work, which is usually the last part, takes the majority of the effort, right? And so what games have done in the past, like World of Warcraft is a great example of this, is they did 80% of the work, got the game out, usable, playable, so forth and so on, right? But the little 20% of how the user actually interacts with the game, The users have control through the API to build their own, they're called add-ons. And it can customize your experience as a user. And so to put an internal team to develop all that for each individual customer would be inordinate amount of development time, right?
Right.
So they essentially crowdsource or outsource that to the consumer themselves. And that's kind of what this model reminds me of now, which I think is glorious. So as a company, right, if you look at it, you only have to do 80% of the work as long as it's stable and it's functional and it has its core services enabled. And then you can just kind of crowdsource or outsource it, and you can actually charge people for the privilege of doing it.
Well, I think if you look at, like, you go to, I don't know, like a lot of the neighborhoods you go to, like all the houses you go in, there's 1,000 houses in a neighborhood. Maybe that's just Virginia Beach. We tend to go, there's a flat piece of land, let's put something on it. There's 1,000 houses, there's 5 different models.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's akin to, hey, you walk in the house, your neighbor's house from the exterior looks identical, but when you get in, you pick the carpeting, paint, and all the other stuff, and you make it yours. So I think it's a twofold process. One, it saves them time and effort and money, but more importantly, everybody gets to have the game that they want. They get to have the feel. They get to be who they are, and now you can start to extract a personality to the game.
That's right.
I don't know the name of this game, but when I would stay over in Kosovo, one of the other Americans that was there, young kid, really smart, trying to find his way in technology and doesn't really know what he wants to do. And he started playing some first-person shooter, foraging type game. I don't know what it is. And for those of you out there, I'm in the age group that totally missed video games. Pong came out when I was in high school, and I looked at it and go, yeah, that sounds like fun. I'm going to go back outside. And I'm not making fun of the gaming community. I'm just saying it got by me. But what I heard one day went from playing a video game to this game has the ability for you to build servers. And so they have the base creation tool, you create that, and then you pay for server time. And where they had really gotten to was, and it's all ranked. They started out in 40,240 something, and then they were in the top 15 like 6 months later. And it was a group of people, and what I heard stopped being game playing and started being server admin and development and everything like that. And then he came to me and said, hey, I think there's a big problem with cybersecurity in the gaming industry as far as how we secure this stuff, and I want to take a look at it. To me, that was absolutely amazing, because his father was totally concerned that all he was going to do is sit around and play video games all day. And I'm sure at first he got there, he would go and listen and learn from cybersecurity professionals for a while. He'd go play games. But then that corporate knowledge that he was gaining from hanging out with some really smart dudes crept into his life, and he's like, we can do something different. I think that is the intent of, because where did World of Warcraft come from? It came from playing like a board game, right?
Well, you can go all the way back to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I mean, because I can remember when I was, and this goes back into the 80s, just not to date myself, you'd be on a Navy ship and you'd find these corners and these kids would be playing Dungeons and Dragons all the time, right? Yeah. And now, what are they doing? They're on a device of some sort, whether it's their phone or thing. Like, I have a test phone. It's a OnePlus 7T or OnePlus 7 Pro, and they totally have a gaming mode because they don't have the little notch. Because when you want to do a selfie, the little camera pops up.
Right.
And it was, the whole thing's designed like, they have their own rolled version of Android. It's called Oxygen OS. And by the way, not as a shameless plug, they killed it on the design. I mean, it's a clean, for those of you that like the Pixel and the clean Google interface without all the other skins on top of HTC or Samsung or whatever, theirs is really clean like that as well. And then you go into gaming mode, because there's no notch. Now these guys can get a full screen.
That's right.
Get a full screen view, right? But people are doing that in industry now as well. I mean, that's a huge, huge thing in industry. Is where's the 80%? Do it in school. I mean, we talk about this on the show all the time. I tell my kids to get a 3.5, right? If you're a 3.5 in life, you're going to win, because you're going to know how to work hard. You're going to get that 80% down. And actually at a 3.5, you're probably at 85 or 90%. So you're going into overload on starting to use time that's not efficient, but it becomes efficient because it separates you from the herd, and you're going to be able to go out and have a life and have fun and do things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting how there's some like overlap there, right? I don't know if that's a hard or a soft segue to the nuclear power plant being a crypto miner,
I love that.
but it's decision making at its heart, right?
It is, yeah.
And I'm fascinated by the decision making that goes into like these really, I don't know if you want to call them important or potentially catastrophic outcomes, but man, I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by it. Like, what I really want to understand what led to the conclusion of let's hook this up and crypto mine with it.
Hey, for those people that are unaware of what we're talking about, it was just discovered that some employees, not with no management oversight, decided to take the power resources of a nuclear power plant and hook it to the internet and crypto mine with it in Ukraine. And everybody that probably watches the show and everybody could understand the catastrophic effects or potential effects of connecting a nuclear facility to the internet willy-nilly, right? And I think when we have to put that into the decision science, right? And because I think there's a whole field now of study that deals with decision making and why. I think just like we look at, when you look at workforce education, whether it's hard skills like welding, stuff like that, or now what I believe coding and things like that, they're all born out of military workforce training, right?
Mm-hmm.
How to take some kid that took an ASVAB, got in the front door of the just, hey, I think you're going to be pretty good at something, or I have a minimum test score and I'm going to fight you that I want to learn how to do something on your dime, and get them to be competent, right? One of the things that I think I'm a big believer that most big errors are not intentional. Like, people don't intend to be malicious, make the wrong decision, right? It's an unintended consequence of they didn't think it through, right?
Right.
No
Right.
imagination, right? when if you have an accident in a nuclear power plant, nobody thought that it would become a thing, right? They couldn't imagine the consequences of their actions, and they made a decision based on that lack of imagination. And that's in my mind, more than anything, that's what fuels miscreant behavior. From 15-year-old walking out there, jumping out of the window at night to go hang out with their friends because their parents told them they couldn't leave the house. They can't imagine the consequences of that. To, hey, let's hook the nuclear power plant up to the internet so we can make some money.
Right.
I know when you say it out loud, it sounds really bad, and actually you probably weren't victim to this because you weren't in the office all the time, but people would come in the office all the time, or they still do, and they'll tell me something, and I go, hey, look, I want to hear all of your ideas. But what I want to do is I want to create a filter where I hear all the good ones.
Right.
And they're like, well, how do we know whether a good one? I don't have to know whether it's good or bad. What I have to know is that you believe in it. You're not just flying by my office and go, hey, let's see if the old man will get this one today, right? And so I've told people this since I was in the Navy and everything, and all of almost 12, 15 years that I've been out, is go look in the mirror, talk to yourself out loud,
yes,
and get your idea out, make the statement. If you look away from the mirror or you laugh, it's not a good idea, because your body won't lie to you. Your body's going to tell you, hey, I might need to go check this one out, right? Nobody did that at that power plant in the Ukraine. They were like, hey, what do you think about hooking the internet up? Yes. All right.
Well, it's interesting, man. Yesterday at cheap plug High Point University, they had a special guest come in and give a presentation on metacognition to all the faculty. And the idea was that there's some things you can consider that you might be able to change in your classroom to get more engagement, to drive scores higher, so forth and so on. And this lady made this great point and gave an actual quantitative example of a student she had. She's a former professor at, I think, LSU. She taught chemistry. And she had a student, I'm vastly paraphrasing this, okay? Had a student that was maybe doing like a D average, all right? And she advised or mentored this student exactly what you just said. Have an external dialogue. That way you're positioning yourself rather as the target of information, the source of it.
Right.
And we know psychologically that when you think, you have to vocalize it to actually process it. You can't just be stuck in your own little self echo chamber. It doesn't work very well. And so what this dude did, this is fabulous, man. What this student did is he started leaving class and going back to his dorm room, and he would lecture his pet goldfish. And he would sit down and lecture the fish until he really felt like he understood it. And I shit you not, man. She showed the graphs of his scores. And so test A, he had like a D average.
Right.
By test 2, maybe a month later, he had a B average. By the third test, towards the end of the course, he was up at a low A average. Just by lecturing his fish, man. I mean, that's all he did. Nothing different other than that.
I'm kind of chuckling to myself because, I spent 5 years in front of teaching technology to people every day of the week. And, the first 6 months, it was rough, right? Everything had to be scripted, thing. And so I literally was talking myself into the job, right? And I hate, the thing. I mean, I not that I'm embarrassed with the product I put out in day one, but I'd much rather use year 4 and 6 months as my game. And what it did was provide me now with a voice and technology, but more importantly, when people come to me and say, "Hey, what do you think about this idea?" Right? I have a baseline that says either that sounds crazy, right? That's crazy talk, or let me give you a marker and I want you to draw it on the board.
Right. Yeah.
Because what myself and all the other instructors that were teaching this, we never used PowerPoint. Right. And we didn't use it because, we had some sort of stress disorder over it being used on us for 20 plus years. Right. And I've told senior leaders in the military, whether they wanted to listen or not, and C-level executives and everything, like one of the big shortcomings of that presentation-based software, we call it PowerPoint just because it's like Kleenex now, but presentation-based software is this: it lacks context.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How many times have you been told to get your deck together and then send it out to everybody prior to that?
Right.
Well, what you're allowing them to do is create their own context and critique that before it even gets, and come up with arguments before they even hear what you're stating. Right. I literally, last week or the last time we did this, your euphemism was great. I would rather have testicular cancer than get a PowerPoint presentation together, right? I mean, because it hurts my parts. It does. It literally gives me angst because everything you're doing lacks context. And I think when you talk about in the military, especially with the war on terror, you're in Afghanistan in particular, you're dealing with a society who in part still blames Genghis Khan for their problems for destroying the aquifers more than 3 hours ago.
Right.
That's the context. That's the context that they work in, right? They work in centuries. They can be angry for centuries, and they will sit cross-legged and wait you out until you either really help them dramatically or you get tired and you go home. Right. And I don't say individual soldier, sailor, those guys. I'm saying as a society, at some point, Americans are going to be like, all right, I don't care what goes on over there. I don't care if it's a smoking hole in the dirt. Just stop spending resources on it.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to context. And
it does.
In your head, how do I categorize? How do I make that card catalog of information, right? And I don't know if you know anybody that's ever majored in library science.
Yes.
Those are some interesting cats.
Yeah, they are.
Those are for the rest of their life, and I believe you can only major that if you have some severe OCD, right? I mean, because God bless them, right? I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, we've kind of, I mean, how many times I don't even know, other than it's a place to study, the kids walk into libraries anymore and physically go grab a book, right? Because, as we've said before, we've got the greatest tool at our fingertips to gather information, and yet cat videos are the number one thing that are on the internet.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that Netflix as an entity generates 40-50% of all internet traffic tells you everything you need to know about Western civilization at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, if that's, and I believe that's a true number, what's the psychology of that? That's the psychology of escapism.
Yeah.
Right? People are looking to not think about what goes on in their daily life, right? And think about And I'll go back to when I was a high school student, because it's definitely pre-internet. It's late 70s, early 80s. We had almost zero distractors that kept us from being truly social with other humans. Right? You couldn't wait to get home. The worst thing that happened was you didn't have your homework done and you had to sit in your house and do it while your friends were out in the street running around. And then you came in and you ate dinner, and then you went back and you hung out in the neighborhood with your tribe until the lights came on, or whatever, whatever the metric for you having to come back in the house.
Right.
Only functionally 3 channels that worked on the television. And if you wanted to go to a movie, you wanted to do anything else, you had to go out and be in public with other people.
Right.
And so you had to be alone with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll say this every show, and as long as people want to listen until they stop. My life changed dramatically for the better when it was listening to a monk, right? You guys, name's Don Party. It's called the Monk with a MacBook. And he literally, it was one statement. When you want to get to know people and you want to get to know other humans, what do? You schedule, hey, let's go have coffee. We'll do this, right? Even this is better than just talking on the phone. But you sit down with people and you listen to them and you learn about them, right? Create a relationship with them. How much time do you spend doing that with yourself? Right. And no, not driving, not doing anything, just sitting quietly with yourself and talking to yourself. I don't mean in the multiple personality, way. I mean, get to know yourself, so that, because I think most of what drives this, I can't be alone with me and I've got to have this constant influence, is you're afraid to go, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, this scares me, I need to do better at this, right? And to become self-aware.
Yeah.
Right. I think, as we kind of in the voice of what we do here every week, I understand technology, right? And I think I understand it better than a lot of other people, but I'm not a true technologist. You don't want me banging on a computer writing code, right? You do if you want to go out of business.
Right.
If that's your intent to take a company, make me a developer, right? But I think I have a unique skill in getting all those people in the arena of development and sales, and to all work together and let's walk the same walk. I think today I'm much better at it because I'm much more self-aware than I was even 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, it's an interesting shift in culture where, probably for you, me growing up in the late 80s, early 90s isn't fundamentally different than your childhood. Because I was pre-internet, right? And for the record, I don't know if I've ever said this, my mom was a librarian, and she was a children's librarian and a storyteller. And so that power of narrative and the importance of a library and its function and the OCD that goes along with, dude, I can still tell you what books go in which section by Dewey Decimal Number, right? I mean, my parents' basement in Ohio is a library of children's books, and it's organized by Dewey Decimal.
Perfect.
And author's last name, first letter of last name. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is there's this shift where, I think our peer groups and us as individuals growing up, going to undergrad, being in life, the first big social hurdle, especially going outside of your affinity group or your tribe, was the natural fear of being in front of people and being viewed and having to speak, right? It causes anxiety. And what's interesting is I see now the social structure, at least of a generation or two below us, is the exact opposite. They seemingly have no issue speaking in public for the most part. But what you just pointed out is they're unable to have internal dialogues and process what it means to dialogue with your higher order self, capital S, right? And it's really interesting with the effects that produces, let's say.
You still see it though, right? You see it in sports a lot, where you've got some people want the ball when it gets hard, and some people don't want the ball.
Right, exactly.
And I have no definitive proof on this, but for the most part, I think it's folks that are more self-aware want the ball, right? Because they know their shortcomings, right? Look at Michael Jordan has a big thing where because I lose, I win. Right, 26 times I was given the ball at the last minute of the game. He's this big narrative. It's actually a really cool statement on life, right? And not having a fear of failure, to a certain extent, I believe, requires you to have a good internal monologue. Because when you fail, people pull away from you. That's a natural reaction. Nobody wants to be around the person that lost.
Right.
Look at the end of the Super Bowl. What happens? The team that lost fades off the field, and then the rest of it, I'm going to Disneyland. And watch every sporting event, right? Be in a room of executives when somebody's getting chastised. You watch everybody sit up straight in their chair, and for the most part, they start crossing their arms and creating that metaphorical barrier between them and the person that's getting taken to.
Right. Right.
But if you watch the true leaders in the room, if you're just sitting around and going, okay, this is going bad. I know somebody's not yelling at me, so I'm not going to close up. I'm going to sit here and be patient while this person gets it taken to them, because in most cases they probably deserved it. And just watch that group, and you're going to learn as a leader who wants the ball. Right? When it's hard, when something's got to get done to make the business, the team, the social group better, who's going to be that leader, and who takes the ball and runs with it, right? And who's not afraid to go, yep, I tried and I failed. Right? I mean, and that's, Admiral McCraven, who used to be the senior SEAL, has a great statement about, people ask him what BUDS is about, what the training pipeline is. And one of the key indicators in there is we want to see people who recover from failure quickly.
Right, exactly.
I think that is the key hallmark of life. And I think one of the stressors, and this is 32 years ago when I was going through it, I had no idea what was happening to me. But you start to get, hopefully when you get older, you get more thoughtful so that you can help the next group of people behind you be more successful than you are. Is you were left to your devices quite a bit, right? Especially in stressful situations. It was, don't talk to each other, sit there, do this, right? And you had time to contemplate your own demise or your own success, right?
Right.
And what you would see is groups of people, in what they would do is they would sit you arm in arm in the surf zone in the Pacific Ocean in December, and your body temperature would start to drop precipitously, right? You can either feed off that, or you could basically just crumble your psyche. And I hate to say this, but I wasn't the world's best BUD student. You know what? I didn't quit.
Right. Right.
Yeah. That's the key attribute here. Like, how'd you make it through? I didn't quit. Right? People, and when I'm speaking, people are like, how'd you make it through SEAL training? I didn't ring the bell. I didn't quit. That's right. There's a minimum standard. I met it. And I know students that were great BUD students that were horrible team guys, or less than, or and vice versa. And then everybody in the middle. Right? I started to fuel off people quitting. Right? That was a power pellet to me when somebody's like, boom, they get up out of their water and they go run and they ring the bell. That became a power pellet to me.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Like, my class started with 160 people. When we started Hell Week 6 weeks later, it was 106. We finished with 13. We had those 13 people 2 days in. Right? And the rest of the week, we just had to go through the motions because that's what you got to do. It can't be like, oh, we got enough, let's go. You get full benefit for the full 5 days, right?
Right.
At the time, you build this 10 feet tall bulletproof psyche in yourself that, hey, I'm one of 13 dudes that made it out of this big crowd of people. When in reality, hey, I was just too dumb to say, I'm not going to put up with this, right? Or did I find my tribe? Right? Did I truly find the kinship with people like me? Or was I left to my devices long enough to go, you know what? You're not going to break me. Right? Whatever it is. Because I remember we had, you're constantly cold. And then they put you inside a room and it's warm, and they lay you on your back in the dark in a big circle and tell you not to fall asleep, but you can't talk to anybody or do anything. Right? But I remember looking there, and we kind of had this thing where one person, we tap each other with our feet. You get creative on how to do this, right? Because SEAL training, unlike any other special forces training in the globe, is geared towards team success. It's the only training in the world where you're engaged with a team.
Right.
Your success is team-based. Yes, you have minimum standards for runs, swims, pulls, pushes, stuff, but it's a minimum standard. If the minimum standard is 12 and I do 20, okay, I'm recognized as somebody that's good at pull-ups, but I don't get any extra for it. I don't get another cookie, or I don't get to eat again, or anything like that. But as a team, if we're successful, we all get to enjoy the success, right? And that's a life skill that, we always joke, you never do anything alone in the field teams. You always have a swim buddy, right? And my swim buddy and buds, I talk to them all the time, right? And that was 1987, and we still communicate frequently, right?
Right.
And it creates a mindset, right? But I just, what you're allowed to do is get inside your own head. And I think people that are ultimately successful, and I can trace, when you have ups and downs in life, I can trace mine to times when I got out of my own head, right? And I started looking at myself externally rather than taking care of myself internally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think this ties all the way back to where we started with the power plant decisions into PowerPoints. So tell me what you think about this. So like when I look at a PowerPoint, which I fundamentally don't use, there's very few circumstances in which I'll use one. To me, what they lack is this concept of a connective narrative, right? Yeah. And so because you get a slide and there we go, has points, and then you go to the next slide and it has points, but there's never a way, because of the limitation of the software, to stack those and then connect the points, which is what narrative does. That's storytelling. And you don't get that from that. And it just doesn't engender that type of environment. And so at the same time, there's certain decisions that we ought to be able to make as individuals. Like, what do I want for lunch today? I don't need a tribe to help me make that decision, right?
Yeah, some days I do. Some days I really do. I'm like, I don't care. Somebody help me out with that.
Fair enough. But if you did that continually, there's something dysfunctional, right?
Yes.
And your tribe's probably not going to like you very much.
No, they don't.
Whereas, and so as an individual, our world, let's say, is this big. And so within that sphere, I have narrative that helps me make decisions appropriately. And then by virtue of the tribe, it's the collective. God damn it. There's the frame. Right? Your world gets not exponentially, but somehow logarithmically bigger, because you're powered by multiple people.
Right.
And this is the power of group decision making. And so I think about this power plant crypto mining situation, and I think to myself, well, was this the decision of an individual and they just failed because as an individual the world is only this big?
Right.
And they were stuck in like a PowerPoint mode of decision making where points of a narrative are not linked? Or was it a group of people that for some reason decided this was actually a really good idea?
Right. I mean, guys that get together and they're going to knock off a 7-Eleven, right? They feed off each other's. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. When in actuality, they need one more person that's thinking. Again, I think in the last episode, we spent quite a bit of time talking about risk mitigation, right?
Yes. And
my approach is as a byproduct of my experience, right? And so what if you would imagine being in a nuclear facility, there's probably going to be more than one little book of procedures, right? That book's not this big, right? I mean, there's a procedure for everything, right?
Right.
Rightfully so. And it would be the same on a ship. It's one of the reasons that the Navy takes pride in how hard it is to become a nuclear sailor, because it matters, right? And the process, procedure, and everything is spelled out with excruciating detail. And to a certain extent, a lot of that has to be memorized, because when something goes wrong, I don't have time to go look up the book and go, hey, when the temperature goes up, what do I got to do? Right? That kind of thing. That decision making probably happened at a mid-level or a lower level, right? And what was put in place by leadership, what didn't they imagine, right? And in the U.S., when we talk about power plants, we want to connect power plants and SCADA facilities in general to the internet for a vastly different reason. We want it to be efficient, and we want the efficiency that distributed control systems monitored by up to and including artificial intelligence can grab, right? And how predictive they can be. The unintended consequence is can we be secure from nation state level attacks?
Right.
And I mean, one theory right now is, and I almost hope it's true. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's not the worst thing that can happen. Is much in the same way in the 50s and up through the 80s, we had mutually assured destruction with everybody had enough nuclear weapons pointed at each other to basically remove this planet from orbit. And now the theory is that every nation state is in every other nation state power grid.
Yeah.
That we might, like in the Cold War, you know, you send some little satellite nation to go poke the bear a little bit, or poke the cowboy a little bit, and then everybody retracts, and the world put the pin back in the grenade, and the world survives. And so one narrative is that exists right now, right? And that, to me, especially like, you know, we were talking about network security last week with Dan, or 2 weeks ago with Dan, and you know, as a purveyor of security, what do I have to defend against, right? That totally makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
But by the same token, you know, what relevant information was not put out by the leadership of that power plant that says, hey, by the way, connecting this thing to the internet without a whole bunch of checks and balances is a really bad idea, right? Because, and I'll guarantee you what the leadership is going to say, we couldn't have imagined that somebody would ever think that was a good idea, right? But that's why you have leaders, and that's why you have junior people. Because your job as a leader, at whatever stop it is to make the person below you smarter tomorrow about what's important than it was the day he showed up to work. Right? And
Exactly.
that, because I don't think if people believe that, like, you know, so, and again, the other thing is that China's been doing it for years just to generate revenue. I'm going to say they're doing it in a much more considered fashion, if they are, because it's a nation state. It's a nation state thing, and they're like, hey, this is fine, but we don't want to have a scorching hole to the center of the earth.
That's right. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You know, and if what you read in that article about the Ukraine is true, you know, it wasn't the guy sweeping the floors, but he knows where that guy puts his broom away every day of the week.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's just, I just find it so massively interesting, man. Like, I can just imagine, I've said this before about different things. Like, here's a counterexample of always having that dissenting voice. You've talked about this before, right? Where I went a couple months ago, more than a couple months, but whatever. I have a family friend through my wife here that is a high-level IT person for Daimler Chrysler. Okay. And he took me to one of the Freightliner factories where they manufacture the giant semi-trucks. Yeah. And I wanted to see the robotics is what I really wanted to see. And he took me on a whole tour, and I was marveled by the idea that there was a place where there was, let's say, 10 people in an assembly line, right? And they're doing stuff with the actual chassis frame of the truck. Yep. And somebody figured out at some point that instead of having the people move around because it costs time, it's inefficient, and it has too much risk for bodily injury, they moved the whole floor.
Thank you, Henry Ford.
Right? Yeah. And at that moment, I said it to my friend. His name's Brent. I said, Brent, can you imagine being in a meeting and everybody's like, hey, how can we make this more efficient? How can we do this safer? And the one dissenting voice is, hey, wait, what if we move the floor instead of the people? They stay still. They don't really move. We'll move the whole floor around them. And they did it, man. Right? And so, go ahead.
With anything, though, major decisions like paradigm shifting, you know, where, you know, hey, we've never done this before, right? Because that paralyzes more great ideas than anything else.
Right.
It takes a really strong personality, right? Whether it's Henry Ford or Steve Jobs or, you know, we've all heard stories of these great leaders. Jeff Bezos is another one that, I don't know if you remember we had the guy, one of the UX UI guys at Sound Circle had built the UI UX for the Fire Phone.
Yeah, I remember that guy.
Stories about Bezos when everybody's like ready to basically just chuck in the towel and walk out. And he walks in, and 2 minutes later, everybody's motivated. They want to run through a wall.
Right.
That's what he said, right? And because he's a galvanizing force, you know. And you know, it's funny as we talk about the auto industry. You look today, the big disservice that was done 30 years ago when people said, "Hey, we want to start changing," and it was made. The change wasn't made because of unions, right? And the pull. And I don't want to get into a discussion. Please don't at me about the value or non-value of unions, right? I'm just saying that's what it was. The unions, manufacturers say, hey, in Detroit, we're going to bring in some robots to start doing some welding because they weld better than you guys do. They're more accurate. And they said, no, you're not, or we'll all quit. And so they went with the paradigm that they were used to. And it fundamentally changed the auto industry forever. Right?
Yeah.
And, that and steel industry not wanting robots and not wanting to be automated. Hey, we're going to lose 10% of the workforce and retrain them to keep us in an industry for the next 50 years. Well, that business went to, I think, Japan, then it went to Korea. Now it's going to India because you've got one life cycle because of the capital investment to build that.
Right.
Now, Toyota in the U.S. will give tours every day, and they will talk about the process. And if GM or Chrysler or anybody shows up, they will hand you the book that they use. Here's the process and with which we do it. And to hear the head of Toyota USA talk about it, he's like, we don't care. You can have the book. You can have our process. What you don't have is our mindset and our culture on how the people view what they do. That's leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. Here's the playbook. I'll give it to you. Right? To me, it's akin to an NFL team, right? You're getting ready to play the team, and how arrogant would that be? Like, just to walk across the field and go, hey, by the way, here's our playbook. These are the first 25 plays we're going to be running. And then you go out and you smack them in the mouth and you do it. Why? Because of culture and execution.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? That's what people are afraid about, right? Or afraid of, right? And, most, from what I've been told, most professional teams now are getting like an iPad or some sort of tablet device, and it's got the playbook, right? They're not getting a physical playbook anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And to me, it comes back to that argument, because before it was like, hey, you had playbook number 1, you had playbook number 2, and it was assigned to each player. Well, now, hey, put the playbook on there, make it encrypted. Mm-hmm. Right? Guys got to type a password in to get that document, to get that information to come up to them. So now I don't have to have control of the information anymore because the information is safe if the guy loses the iPad, whatever, right? But think about that concept of, hey, take our battle plan. Right? Take our process, do whatever you'd like with it. I don't care, because culture to us is the most important thing. And our people buy into what we do, and therefore they've mastered the process that we want, and we're successful because of that. That's true leadership. If you go back to that nuclear power plant, there's a guy who gets on the dynamite, he's got a shirt on, and the guy's got a bullet on, and they probably don't talk that much.
Right.
As long as there's no red lights that go off on the panels, everybody's happy, right? And there's like, oh, that guy's doing maintenance over there, that guy's doing that, but there's no innovative thought. And how much effort did Toyota or a lot of businesses put into culture and creating a place where no matter where you're at in the structure, your ideas are welcome, because great ideas come from everywhere. And also saying, hey, we want to hear your good ideas. Right? So you have to have some sort of self-censor about yourself and go.
Right.
And from a leadership perspective, they're basically just taking the leash off and letting people go be great. How hard is that for most leaders? Right? In a transition, right? I think, what's leadership going to be like 25 years from now when my 21-year-old is 46, and he's a senior person in an organization growing up through how he's grown up.
Yeah, right. That's crazy to think about, really.
Right? We're byproducts thing. And I think that to be successful in leadership today, especially at the C-level, when you're talking people that are in their 40s, 50s, and sometimes 60s, you really have to go against your childhood. Right? Because we were brought up, and I specifically was brought up in an era where, hey, there's an adult there. Right? If they tell you to do something, do it. Right? Because it's the Indian chief mentality, right? He's the smartest because he's seen more turns of the earth, right?
Right.
And parents didn't think anything about dropping their kids off at places where adults were, because there were adults that were going to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
12 years old. Put me on public transportation with a $10 bill, go down to Fenway Park, get a ticket. Some dude that's somewhere between 70 and 200 years old, and he probably fought the revolution, gets me to my seat, make sure I get a hot dog, and then make sure I get out of the stadium and get there with another group of kids, and we take public transportation back home.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in America, raise your hands if you're going to let your kids do that today. There's no effing way.
No.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Right? Do I believe that society is that much more abhorrent than it was when I was a 12-year-old, 13-year-old? No. Do I believe we have much better ways of cataloging that than we did then? Yes. But here's the difference. When it happened, in most circumstances, other adults would be around to say, hey, you can't do that. Now people keep to themselves and then turn around and walk away. When you look at shootings and things like that, you always say, well, he was a quiet guy. Well, yeah, because he was plotting the demise of a bunch of adults, right? He was inside himself, and not for really good reasons, right?
Right.
What's the decision science, right? We get on here and we talk about we want to talk about the positives of these things and really where they go. Well, if I'm going to say, hey, I think you should spend some time with yourself. What if you have some sort of psychological ailment, right? You have a mental health issue, and you spend a lot of time with yourself, right? How does that manifest itself?
Right.
And now with social media, with the internet and everything, you can spend a lot of time with just yourself and appear to be social, like have stimuli. But again, we're talking 40% of the internet traffic is on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many people. There's so many people. Like, I thought about that. I was having a conversation years ago with a friend, a couple years ago, when I was still living in California. And he said something to the effect of, people nowadays, so to speak, are just all assholes. And I said, well, wait a minute, check this out, right? Let's, for the sake of argument, say there's 350 million people in the US. That's close, right? But just for math purposes. And so let's say you can go your entire life and meet 1%. That's a shitload of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible, because it's only 1%, that's the 1% that are all assholes. And so you can say that everybody I've met is an asshole, but you need to be able to turn around and say, well, that's because it's this narrow slice, and maybe I need to go get myself into another situation so I'm not exposed to just that 1%. And that's that gray area that technology doesn't seem to do a good job yet of managing. Of, if I'm stuck in an echo chamber that's all assholes, however you want to spin that, how do I get out of that into another one where I have a chance of finding people that aren't? Right? Does that make sense?
Right. Well, here's the question I would have asked. Why do you think they're assholes?
Yeah. Right.
Because I think a lot in society today, and social media really fuels this in a positive light or a negative light. And, as a society lately, we tend to just go, hey, that's really bad over there. And I think it's more of a mechanism to deflect, right? Because nobody's perfect, and everybody has their own ups and downs. And if you're focusing on somebody else's ups and downs, you're not currently looking at mine. Right.
Right.
There's a good sociological argument that, hey, keep people looking over there, and I can do wound care on myself. Right.
That's right.
Psychologically, emotionally, and everything like that. Today, we basically say people are a-holes, or they're this, or they're that. And we want to label everybody if they disagree with our opinion. Right. So did you grow up in rural Oklahoma, and now I plant you on South Beach on a Saturday afternoon, right? And you're like, oh, those people are a-holes. No, they're just different than you.
That's right.
And they grew up with a different set of values than you. And again, I'm not here advocating one way or the other, right? But it's just, and the reason is you have to, what we lack now, and we say we're tolerant, I think we're at the least tolerant point in my lifetime we've ever been.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right. And it's all sides, right? I mean, whether it's politically, socially, or whatever, right? And we can argue how we got there and what snowball started to roll down the hill that precipitated all this. But I think if we say, hey, we're at the least tolerant position in history, and everybody on all sides agrees to that, right? Because that's where, you have to, somebody goes, oh no, my opinion's right. And then the wheels fall off. The fourth wheel comes off the cart. You got to stop and put it back on. Right. But I think that fuels that behavior. Like, I love the whole concept of 6 degrees of separation. Right. I love that concept. Mm-hmm. Right. And over the years, I've been fortunate enough to meet living presidents, and a really good friend of mine is a former cabinet secretary. So just with that, knowing if I didn't ever meet anybody else, if I met that one dude being a cabinet secretary, how many world leaders am I 2 degrees away from?
Yeah, right,
That's
right.
insane. That to me is like, again, when I get to by myself, sometimes I'm like, I am 1 degree of separation or 2 degrees of separation away from Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Or the leader of China or Korea or anybody. It just, why? Because I know one guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got one person in my life that has given me a gateway to be that closely in an affinity group, possibly with a world leader, with an astronaut. Right? There's a bunch of SEAL astronauts. So I'm guarantee you I'm less than 6 degrees of separation away from Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
And that just fascinates me. Like, because it's not like I want to go, oh man, I'm gonna call him up so I can meet that guy. I just think, and I think I go back to that picture from, and I can't remember what Apollo mission it was, where everybody in humanity and human humanity was in that photo.
Oh yeah.
For the one guy that was the lunar orbiter commander taking the picture of Earth, the picture of the surface of the moon, and that one dude was the only person in human history that wasn't in the photo in some metaphysical fashion or not. That is
right
to me. I could contemplate that those two things. I could contemplate that crap all day long. Right?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating, man. And inside of that is the little tiny decisions we make along this path of life, right? That get you into these situations where hopefully you've been prepared enough to recognize opportunity for what it is, and then you have, I don't know if you want to call it the courage or the wherewithal or maybe the ignorance to grasp it in some cases, right? And it just compounds itself. And somehow, whether it's your internal dialogue, I think that's part of it, and your immediate tribe and how that scales up. Right. You get to places like being one step away from a world leader instead of one step away from the dude that hooked up a crypto miner to a nuclear power plant.
Yeah, exactly. I'd actually like to be one step away from that guy so I can call him and go, dude, let me talk to these cats. I want to figure out what they were thinking when they did it, right?
Yeah, right? No, absolutely.
I know what they were thinking. Hey, look, no harm's going to come of this. And it's this much power, nobody's ever going to notice it. It won't even show up as a rounding error, an anomaly in any measurement that we take, and we'll make a lot of money, right? And then like, boom, let's go do it. And you got 2 or 3 other morons that are sitting around that are like-minded, right? Because that's his tribe, and people, by definition, hang out with people that agree with them.
Yes,
right? Because that's easy in life. Go hang out with people that you vehemently disagree with for a while and see what you're like at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about this show is we all seem to agree on enough that we can have this friendship and this dialogue and be reasonable. But there's little things we disagree on that I think enrich the conversation. And you're like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't think about it that way. Right?
Right. Well, what it comes back to is and I hate to say it comes back to being an adult because it's demeaning to think. It comes back to being what I believe to be self-aware. Right? I can disagree with you and not hate you because that's how I was brought up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're right, but your opinion has value. Right. And everybody has somebody that loves them. Right. The old, it's a bad analogy. It's like even Hitler had a mother. Right.
It's true, though.
Mother Hitler used to love Lil Adolf. Right. But everybody has somebody that loves them. And how along the way, and I think right now, really, we have to go back and take a look at how quickly can a vocal minority make the majority irrelevant. Right. And it comes by not speaking up for dissent. Right? People get scared. Right. And I'll straight up, some of the worst decisions I've ever made for my well-being in the short term were because, as a friend of mine would say, you speak truth to power.
Yeah. Right.
They don't like it. Right.
No.
And especially if they've been allowed to be a gas bag and get away with it their whole life. Right. In a corporate situation, it comes down to a CEO being a bully, right? And creating an environment where if you're in total agreement with me all the time, you're my guy and you're going to be with me for the rest of your life. If you're not, I'm going to excommunicate you and do everything I can do to F your life up.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? But what you see along the way with leaders in that ilk is their game plays well at a company for about 18 months. And then the wheels start to fall off the cart, right? Why? Because enough people that can choke dissent, choke on dissent for a while, all of a sudden they can't. And most folks, unlike me, won't walk in the office and go, hey, here, by the way, this is what you're doing. This is really bad. And I'm not advocating you do that. I'm just saying that's where I grew up, right?
Right.
And most people will vote with their feet and they'll just quit.
Yep.
And in most cases, it's going to be the most talented people you have because they're going to be like, I don't have to deal with this.
Yeah, exactly. They have options.
And what that tribe creates is a tribe of C- students that ultimately, as they move together, right? As they move together, are going to ultimately they're going to drive down to a much lower level because at the first stop they've had great success, and with every they're kind of going to take steps down because if you keep peering out dissent, at some point everybody's going to agree with it. I can't remember her name. It was a talk on. It was a talk about world history, and if you look back through world history, how quickly the majority can be made irrelevant, right? That there were, and I don't have the percentages correct, so I don't want to, please don't get on the internet machine and look over there. A very small percentage, let's say 10% of Russians were actually ardent communists and Stalinists, but yet he killed 20 million of his own people, and everybody stood around and said, "Ooh, I hope it's not me next. I'm just going to shut it off." Right? A very small percentage of people were actually hardcore Nazis, yet they were made irrelevant, right, by the minority. And you can go through history and you can find that, right? When we get into this whole thing about Arab culture and jihadists and everything like that, there's 1.2 billion Muslims on the planet, and even by the most liberal definition of who a jihadist is, there's 300 million, which is a very small percentage.
Right.
And it's not Muslims that are the problem, right? It's Muslims that, through fear in the most part, or through their culture and through their tribe and how they grew up, will not say what that piece of Islam is doing is wrong.
Right.
And so when you have an argument with somebody, it's either all or nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's an imam right now that is standing up advocating to say, hey, if we want to be the true, if we want to be and actualize who we think we are from a peaceful perspective, we have to start to say the behavior of the few is not the culture of the many.
Exactly. Well said.
And that right there, when you look at in business in particular, and I contemplate this a lot, is in talking to folks and hey, what's your culture like and why, right? And I've seen it in multiple businesses. And I was talking to a friend of mine who recently left a position, and she was like, "Yeah, it's just gotten crazy, right? Because that CEO has not grabbed power, right? Has insulated themselves from dissent." Is the way I look at it, right? And they would have all hands meetings every month, and the leadership would talk about transparency. What they really wanted was they wanted to know everything. They didn't want to share anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one way anything in life breeds one way behavior, right? People are going to start to go, well, wait a second. If I'm transparent, I'm now putting myself at a disadvantage, right? Conversely, if you're part of that group of people that is basically made your life's work not dissenting to take care of yourself individually, at what point do you have enough self-loathing to get off the train?
Yeah.
right? Because
Well,
it can't be good for you, right? Because the thing, and well, I was talking to a CEO once, and they said, "What happens when you hate the culture of your company?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, beg your pardon?" And they're like, "Yeah, I hate the culture of my company." I'm like, "Well, you're the CEO,
right.
right? You're the chief culture officer. You're the vanguard of ideas. You're the one that goes out every day and plants the acorn that becomes the mighty oak, right? And you do that with your people." And it was baffling to me. And my thing was transparency. I said, you've got to start to really embrace transparency with your people. And the first thing, and this isn't unusual, they roll back on, is I'm not telling them about the money or anything like that. So that's not what I'm advocating, right? The CFO and you need to know what the balance sheet is, and you need to know how this is working. And people have to believe that you guys have your head on straight and that they're going to get a paycheck in 2 weeks.
Right. Right.
When I talk about transparency, I talk about transparency or context of decision making.
Exactly.
Right? Because in that context, it allows people to go out and make decisions with far greater positive results than they ever could have, because now they're thinking 2 steps down the road. They're not thinking about getting paid in 2 weeks and not pissing anybody off to the point where they say, "Hey, you can go home."
Well, right, because wouldn't you agree that it's the transparency that allows you to disseminate a narrative, which is what connects all those PowerPoint dots,
Right.
right?
And I think great leadership has always been about great storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean storytelling as in a fantastical tale,
No.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the story of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a relationship, a family, a business, a political campaign, right? What captures people's imaginations? A great narrative, a great storyteller. Here's how I'm going to make your life better, and it's not just going to be by giving you free shit,
Right.
right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Right.
I want somebody in my life that's a leader that thinks bigger than I do.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a leader, and I'll tell you, I've interviewed for some jobs where I've just scared the living daylights out of people, right? Because I want to think big, right?
Yeah.
If you want to hire me, you want me to come in and help you change the world, whatever that is, whatever your world is. You want me to help you come in and do that, right? And I interviewed at the behest of a friend of mine for this. They did voting online, but in an app they did voting, right? And they wanted to grow from where they were at to bigger. When I looked at it, I said, it was right after the 2016 election, and we're arguing about the validity of voting machines, and what we can do to make it immutable and things like that. And I looked at that, and this company, they basically do like union elections and school board things, and it was kind of like Survey Monkey, but on steroids, right?
Right.
And my take to them was, let's go change the world, right? We can make this immutable, right? Recently, right before that, India had their first free election, and they had done what it had taken to make almost 1 billion eligible voters vote.
Nice.
And I'm talking rural areas.
Yeah.
They spent the time and effort to build kiosks. They created a system they believed to be immutable and fair, and they did it. And I wanted to, and I didn't hear back from them. And I'm like, all right, they're not interested. They didn't have the guy that put me in that way. And he goes, "You scared me to death." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "They just wanted to go from 1 million to 5 million in revenue, and they wanted somebody to raise a couple $1 million to help them out. And you went in there and you wanted to change the world and knock the corners off the voting thing, and they're scared of that challenge, right? Because what do we always say? Everything great in human history started with massive dissent and opposition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's how we get there, right?
Yeah.
And we've done this. I think I've said this before. When you look at communication, right? This is the thing that scares people about the internet. From the dawn of time, you got one dude that can read, right? You have the town crier. He goes out and tells everybody what somebody else said was important.
Right.
Then we had the printing press. We got posted up around the town, right? Then you had newspapers. All the news that's fit to print, right? And then you had the newspaper baron. Then radio came out. And the airwaves were free, and everybody was communicating back and forth. Then what I call the first great theft of the U.S. by the U.S. government happened. They basically annexed all the airwaves and started to sell them with a very small piece of the ham radio.
Right.
And then became a one-way conversation. As my grandfather used to say, let's go watch the radio, right? Because you'd sit around and look at it, right? And then television came out. And just by the capital expense, it was a one-way transmission. And now look where we're at today. We're on television. Right? We're doing, we can have this great discussion of good or bad, right? And we can invite two people that vehemently disagree with everything we do. We can get on here, we can have a great argument. And I don't mean argue in a bad way. I mean, let's try to hash out some stuff. Right?
Well, right.
So that takes leadership, right? And I'll pound on that every day of the week. It takes somebody to get in the middle of the room and go, hey, I know you violently disagree with them, and I know you violently disagree with them, but it cannot be 100%.
Yeah.
Let's just start with you probably shouldn't drop your dog off at the SPCA or beat your dog. Right? I mean, somewhere in there we can find, if you get a pet, you should take care of a pet. Like this, something that's universal. We can, don't hurt dogs, don't beat kids. Right? I mean, there's got to be something in the middle of the room we can all agree on. That's leadership 101.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you go to a business, you know what you all agree on? You all agree that you want to be successful, you want to make money.
That's right.
Nobody wants to be unemployed, and you want to tell people the ideas that we have, what we bring to the market is of value, and look at the great work we're doing.
Yeah.
Psychology 101. Everybody wants to feel important. How do we get there? That's where the wheels start to deflate and come off the cart, and everybody's like, all right, get the jack out. No, we don't need a jack. We need a strong guy to lift the back. And then we're off in the corner somewhere, and finally somebody's got to walk in the room and go, hey, Mr. Atlas isn't showing up, but every car's got a jack. I'll just lift it up, put the tire back on, and let's go. Right?
Right, but it's kind of in jest, but more or less that's how we ended up with car jacks, right?
Yeah.
Is this idea that you don't silence dissent, and just because it's been done that way doesn't mean it continues to be that way. And you have strong leadership that invites discussion, even when it's oppositional and confrontational, but not in an unhealthy way. And you just start from a first order principle. Like you said, it's beautiful. If we're in business together, even if we disagree, or we're partnering and we disagree, let's all start with a common truth. We want to be successful.
Right.
We all have families, we all have kids, we have dogs, so forth and so on that we have to take care of. But let's not turn into Nazis or communists. Right?
Right.
We don't need to go to that extreme.
Exactly. Let's not try, let's not try to do all this. But here's where it really gets interesting in my mind. The reason that we end up having all of these dissent and people working behind each other's backs and everything, and you've got to have a leader in the middle of the room to go, okay, stop. We've had enough discussion. Let's go make a decision, right? Because the whole paralysis by analysis thing is everybody wants their idea to be the one that wins, right? Mm-hmm. That's the value, right? A good leader is going to germinate the ability to say, your idea is part of the overall great strategy that we're doing, and you get a win because we get a win. Because most of the subversive behavior happens when somebody has extraordinary access to a leader, and a lot of leaders fall prey to they go with the last thing they heard.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where when you have, in software, say, hey, we have a product roadmap. Product roadmap should be two things. It's a sales tool, because we're scalable, predictable, and repeatable, and we can execute. And if my sales team goes out and says, hey, we're going to deliver this in October, everybody knows we are because we've done it the last 14 times. But more importantly, it's a weapon or a shield to save the company from itself.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? It's to keep everybody on the agreed upon track. Right?
Yep.
I have a boss, and he's one of my oldest mentors. And I don't mean age-wise, just longest mentor. And I love him to death. His name's Ed. He's a beautiful human being. And he's the one that gave me the, hey, when you walk into a room, stand around for 10 minutes. If you can't figure out who the idiot is, it's you. That's it.
Yeah.
Simple stuff. Like I always tell people, if you want to give people something to walk away with, they can't be inclined to want to pull their phone out and take it down as a note. It has to stick.
Yeah, right.
And he told me that one cold night in the water. He's like, hey, by the way, I'm like, I got nothing better to do but listen to him because we're just out there by ourselves kicking around in the ocean, right? And but it's that, it's the sole concept that you walk in periodically as the leader and go, look, we all have an equal opportunity to die. So right now we're going to have a big discussion on what we're going to do. And in most cases, life scenarios aren't that drastic, right? And
Right.
but it was a great statement to make, right? You're all going to be in the center of the room, and your opinions are going to be heard, right? But on rare cases, you would say, hey, if I ever walk in and I go, look, this is the decision that we're going to go, and there's not any rise for comment. One, there's two things that have happened. One, either I've been told that I'm going to do it, I'm going to execute it to the letter, right? Or I've already got in place a plan that I know will not come to any harm based on the conversations we previously had.
That's right.
Right. And he sought counsel from the junior person up to his deputy when it was appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The leader has to know how to do that, and the subordinate has to know how to accept that. Right. And it comes from the subordinate feeling that at an appropriate time, when they're allowed to voice their opinion, that it was taken seriously. And that's the hard part, right? Because everybody wants, in totality, their view to be the one that gets adopted.
Well, and I think this goes back to what you were saying about transparency too. And this is I think the bad side of where we're at, like with social media, is it's very short.
Mm-hmm.
Not only short because it's literally short, like 140 or 240 characters,
yep.
But its duration is short, even though it's not. There's an illusion there, right? But because the volume that's coming in, it doesn't last very long, right? It's fleeting. And so I think instilling this idea that we have the immediate engagement, and maybe I'm not going to take your idea and use it, but you have to understand in giving ideas that the object isn't to be right now. It's to be right over the iteration of engagement.
Right. Yeah.
And take this long-term view of things. And so you can be wrong now or not accepted or whatever. And you have to process this as an individual, but we're all in the game of doing this for as long as possible. And that takes iteration, you know?
Right. And I think that people, the transparency I like is people have to truly know you value their opinion.
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't agree with you. Hey, and then you have to articulate that with junior people in particular. You know, the prism that you're looking through is this narrow, and mine is this big. Why? Because I have greater context to all the decision making.
That's right.
And I want to hear what you have to say, because if your worldview is this big, in the center of the camera, if your worldview is this big, but you give me a worldview that's that big as a junior person, I know you're on your way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your assumption isn't correct. The fact that you made some assumptions based on the way the world works, or technology, or math, or something, right? There were some empirical leaps that you took because you're thinking better and bigger than getting my way. You're my guy. You're the next person when I'm like, hey, we got to promote somebody to do something. Go get that guy or girl. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's the genesis of innovation.
Yeah, but I think that it's one of the reasons, like I say, I'm never going to be at a company where I'm employee number 65,235. Even if somebody was dumb enough to ever make me the CEO of that company, right? Why? Because I want to know who employee number 2,000 is, right? Or and get that thing. And I think there's two different things. There's starting a business from ground zero is very hard, right? Because you're going to have to place some trust and confidence in friends and family and people that you do, but in a context that maybe you haven't before. And then at some point, you're going to have to say, okay, that didn't really work out. Now you're going to have to make the hard decision to start pushing people to decide that at the very minimum are your friends. And how do I do that?
Right.
I think, and then coming into a company that's already running down the road and kind of being the outsider and being the new guy, and then being able to say, hey, these people have to go, and here's why. Or we need to bring more people like this in, right? And changing kind of the hiring practices, or how we create the tribe, and how to, and get that group working. And then there's, hey, here's a big monster company, right? It's so big that even if I come in and make massive systemic changes in one area, it's never going to turn that far, because it can't. It's the speedboat. It's a speedboat versus the super tanker, right?
Yeah.
I'm driving a super tanker. If I turn the wheel, I'm still going to drive another mile forward before I actually start to affect change. Right? That term, boys and girls, is called advance and transfer for everybody that wants to know a little bit about nautical stuff today. Right? in that advance and transfer, and I use it as a management tool, like what's our advance and transfer? Right? Once we make a decision, how long does it take us to be on that new course? Right? The smaller the company, the more nimble that can be. If you're talking Microsoft, Google, any of these big, massive Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies, if I want to make a huge systemic change, and it's what slows down systemic change, because people look at the level, how daunting that can be, to go, what level of effort do I put in? How hard do I have to spin the wheel?
Right.
To go to that direction, right? And that advance and transfer principle stifles growth. And it does it in massive companies because the level of effort is huge to do that. And the only time people start doing it is when there's catastrophe. Anybody want an example in how to watch a company implode is go look at General Electric. Right? When Jack Welch, they were the belle of the ball. I mean, he intrinsically understood how to build value in a company and how to create hundreds of thousands of employees that all felt like they were engaged in the General Electric brand. And systemically over the past 20, 25 years, I don't know exactly when he left. It's not long. So my dad retired in 87, so it's not long after that. So we're probably talking 30 years. That how quickly that's gone down. Business unit management, brand engagement, offshoring businesses and things like that, right? Not keeping promises with the employees that you made that were long-term employees, right? All of those things, whether, if I've been at the company 5 years and now I see they made a big change to people that were at the company 30 years and they're subsequent to their retirement, changing their retirement plan for the worse, for the benefit of the company and not the employee, now, hey, wait a second, the shoulders that they're standing on now no longer matter as much.
Right.
Bricks become softer and people quit. Right? That in huge companies baffles me, right? Give me a company that's mid-sized, doing $200-300 million of revenue, where you got 150, 200 employees, and you get in a position where if they're a remote or disparate workforce, you bring them into the area twice a year at a minimum, or I go and see them, right? You can manage that, and that can be fun. As a leader, hey, you can make a great living. You can help other people grow. They can make a great living, and you're not having to deal with, the problems of 60 to 100,000 employees.
Right. Exactly.
Easier and everything like that, because now I don't have every decision that gets made. Like when I used to work at BlackBerry before they got scooped up by Raytheon, what we could charge for an hour of work is much different than what Raytheon can charge. Right? And what's important to them is different than what was important to that company.
Right.
Because they're used to missile guidance systems and satellites and things like that. A lot of the work that a smaller company that gets absorbed into a bigger one does is a rounding error on some balance sheet.
Effectively.
What's that third zero? What's that third 8 over there? Oh, that's just that little small company we bought over there, right?
Yeah.
And I like to be the little engine that could be, right? And give me, like I said, startups are hard. And post startups, you got to go raise money. That's a whole different bag of crazy, and that's fun and that's workable and you can grow and you can do things like that. But give me an established company that they're kind of languishing, right? They got up to a certain level and now they're having problems growing. What changes do we have to make? And not necessarily come in and slash and burn on people, but how do what's the motivation to get people done? What aren't we doing technically or tactically, right? That feeds a strategic vision, right? Because the board, certainly the investors are going to give you a strategic vision. It's going to revolve around a certain number, right? Or you two can go home. You pick door number 2, you pick door number 3, get out of here. But at what level do you want to enter? Right? And what's important to you? And I think, people that, how do you say I want to run a Fortune 50 company?
Yeah, right.
It's like the same. I don't think it's the exact transfer, but there's a certain level of, again, the founders of Google. I don't think they ever had in mind that they were, they're not Bond villains, and they didn't start out going, hey, we want this thing to be this massive multi-billion-dollar entity, spread across the globe. But it has happened. They grew into it.
You're right. Right. They were just solving an immediate problem,
Right.
and it
Same
turned
with
into this
Facebook, right? You
giant
can love
mushroom
or hate
cloud of
Zuckerberg.
innovation.
Right. You can love or hate Zuckerberg, but I don't think, I mean, could anybody imagine that Facebook would be what it is, right? And, and how, what happens when you get there, right? It's like, act like you've been there before. Well, how can you imagine that? And then you
Right.
turn around and you look at, you know, the Dow Jones companies, right? Those hardcore companies that have been around. Most 25 of them are not even around anymore, right? But you look at General Electric, you look at the old big brands, even banking, like JP Morgan Chase and all these big banks that survived, right? Those folks worked their way up, right? They didn't start the company; they just worked their way up. They basically got on the dinosaur, the treadmill, or however you want to do it, and they had innovation and inflection points in their career where said, "Okay, you need to go to the next level, and you need to
Right.
go with a dynamic thinker," right? And if I think, and I've never met Jamie Dimon, I don't know. I've talked to people that have, and they say that it's not just his intellect; it's his ability to deal with people and to engage
Yeah.
the human condition. And I always think, like, hey, as a junior person, in the military, if you're a middle of the road guy, your ability to turn around and make the junior man feel like the world revolves around him, and then go talk to an admiral and make sure that he feels the same way about it, that's a gift, right?
Yeah.
And I worked with a CEO who had the intellect to be a Fortune 50 CEO, straight up, one of the smartest people I ever met. Didn't have the temperament, right? Couldn't play well on a board. Couldn't play, in
Right.
the high stakes game of a Fortune 50 board of directors and how you deal with them,
Right.
right? Because they are captains of industry themselves. And
Yeah. Right.
they want to see a certain thing, right?
Yeah. They're at the other 49.
Oh, yeah, exactly, right? Or they're former vice presidents of the United States or former world leaders and things like that, or former ambassador here because you've got a big influence in, you've got a big plant in that country and they want to know what the political psyche is, so that guy gets on the board.
Right. Right.
And I think those are all great reasons. But when you're talking about billions of dollars of market cap and shareholder value and all the other things that we talk about usually as a function of cybersecurity, right? Hey, how quickly can we put a smoking hole in your balance sheet? Don't do updates on Super Patch Tuesday and just like go get drunk. I've got it done, answer, check, we're off. But how do you do that more easily? Get a CEO who doesn't have the temperament to be out there, and the world's going to poke that bear, right? They're going to try to find that, and you have to have an internal mechanism of self-control that says, "Hey, I can absorb that. I'm absorbing that for the X thousands amount of employees and thousands of investors because that's what my job is." Internally, how do I manifest that anger and that angst? I always call it like, hey, when I was a SEAL, you get in trouble. As a leader, something goes wrong, you got to go talk to the old man. You got to walk back across the parking lot to the building. That's your time to go, I'm not going to take it out on the guys. I'm not going to take it out on the guys. I'm not going to take it out on the guy. Right? Because, that's how you lose. That's how you lose control of the organization, right? When everybody perceives he got yelled at, now he's got to yell it out.
Right.
And that trickle down theory of getting your behind you, right? At what point do you go, okay, look, part of this is my fault, right? Because I did not put you in the best position to be successful because I did not articulate our vision correctly or whatever it is, right?
Right.
That goes back to the power plant. That guy running that power plant didn't imagine he'd have to go, hey, by the way, junior criminals of the month, do not hook the power plant up to the internet so you can make money on your own time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but he's going to have to absorb some of that. What I see in business today is catastrophic failure of leadership, and the mid-level guy or the junior guy that makes the mistake goes away. I was reading an article online yesterday, and in the last 6 months, the Navy has fired 5 commanders.
I heard about this. We were talking about this.
From admiral on down to 05 to commander. Right? Because people think this is unbelievably anachronistic policy to do this. And it's always like, hey, if a ship runs aground, the captain's getting fired. Even if the middle of the night he was sleeping and the executive officer or the navigator was up there, it's always going to come back to loss of confidence because you didn't properly train your people to avoid that. Or you didn't properly train your folks to say, or you, or actually, I'll go there. Or you created a hostile work environment. And the
Right.
hostile work environment is this: when the old man goes to sleep at night, nobody home.
Yeah. Right.
Well, wait a
Right.
second. Hey, there's a lighthouse. There's things I'm a little confused because I've been in the Navy 5 years, and you expect me to run this big ship. Hey, you go get the captain right now, right? And it's like I always say, decision making. A lot of times, like, hey, I'm going to make the decision. Why? Because I'm going to get blamed for it either way.
Right.
You have to say, and if that's the right decision, I'm going to use it. But at the end of it, I've got to be that critical leadership stop, right? And holding senior people accountable for their mistakes. And it's literally something I learned in the Navy, right? That hey, cut the head off, not because they were implicit in making that bad decision, but if that was the catastrophic decision that was made, how did we get there?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's got to stop with somebody. And you send a really bad message as a leader or as an organization, is if every time something goes wrong, you always fire the junior man.
Yeah.
Right? I remember one Christmas, last story probably before you got it. Look, I remember one Christmas, we all, I was still on active duty, we all get together and the CEO gets there and puts the Christmas message out. And then there's a hardcore sell about no drinking and driving, right? Or any other kind of miscreant behavior while everybody goes to the holiday season. And it's a value and it needs to be done. Command Master Chief gets out there, and 2 days before this, one of the E5s, one of the junior guys, has 2 beers. It starts snowing here at Virginia Beach, which never does. And this kid grew up in the South, and he slid his car. Well, as luck would have it, when he slid his car, he slid it into a police car. Because the police car was at the intersection, the car was parked. He was out there with lights on, directing traffic through the slush, right?
Right.
Comes back, he has 2 beers. They yank him out in the middle of the room, and he is the worst human being on planet Earth. Meanwhile, and I know this because I'm part of that senior enlisted group of guys, there's a senior enlisted dude who had 50 or 60 dudes that worked for him. He got a DUI, straight up 2.3 on the BAC, bad decision. And that guy's standing there like nothing wrong. I literally, and again, got in trouble for it because I raised my hand. I go, hey, let's not take the dude that had poor young kid that had 2 beers and made a decision that all of you senior folks have made 100 times. Let's drag the senior guy into the middle of the room and use him as the example, because that was the example of poor decision making. The other kid had 2 beers and in no way could imagine sliding into a police car. And we have a policy: if you're not on standby, you can have 2 beers, and that's it, right? And then you've either got to get a ride home or do anything else, right? And this is before Uber and everything like that. So that decision tree for dudes was a lot harder to go try to call a taxi. Virginia has always had some of the toughest drunk driving laws. They're the worst taxi service in America.
Yeah, right.
And again, it's leadership. Hey, what does the governor say? Right? Really right-headed decision to de-glamorize alcohol and make the penalties very stiff because of the potential catastrophe of killing another human being with a 3,000 to 5,000 pound weapon. How does it manifest itself? Well, the command would always say, hey, just call the command, we'll give you a ride home. Well, nobody wanted to do that because then, hey, we're not making a list. Sure, you're not, right?
Yeah, right.
And they weren't, right? But it's putting people in a position to be successful, knowing they're humans and they're going to do silly stuff no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's so funny because I was in this meeting yesterday. I'll wrap up with this.
Yeah.
Being in a new department, our building was renovated over the summer. And as you might suspect, there's some issues, in particular, networking issues. And like you,
I think that's funny with the computer science department. There's networking issues in the building. I love that.
Yeah. And so we're trying to partner with IT, and we had a meeting yesterday. And long story short, I walked out of the meeting and I told my department heads, if you want to know my opinion, I'll share it with you. And they did. So I shared it, and I said, the first thing, the guy's a bad leader. Yeah. You can't throw your people under the bus.
Yeah.
What you do on your own in your own department, how you address that's your business. But when you're partnering with another business unit and your first reaction is to blame the people below you, not only is that bad, but you've completely missed the boat because you're ultimately responsible for it.
Right. Yeah. No, a situation like that, what's the best course of action? Walk in and joke about it.
Right.
Right. It's I know we're the computer science department, but this whole networking thing, the internet's going to catch on, right? Or something like that. We'll get it together. Right?
Yeah.
It's a new building, right? Why don't most people buy when they buy a new car, don't buy the first model year of any revamp of a car? Because you got to have a group of test dummies big enough to pull out all of the potential errors.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You can
Right.
have internal testing. You can on an app, you can run out test plate and have an enterprise test group. But what happens when I release life to the wild? Right? And that's with my internal thoughts. That's with anything, right? I think a lot of stuff, and all of a sudden it's like, what happens when I release this to the wild?
You're right. Right.
Not so good.
Yeah. Well, you don't really know, but sometimes you just got to find out. And,
Yeah.
And like you were saying earlier too, know that you're okay with failing and that you're going to respond quickly to it and continue iterating forward.
I think fail fast is probably one of the best things that I've ever been taught. Right?
Yep.
Get up, dust yourself off, keep running.
Yeah.
Hold on to your junk while it hurts, but keep on moving, right? And do that. So, but yeah, no, this was fun. I'm glad we found this software and got this together live, as opposed to having to do arts and crafts afterwards and everything like that.
Well, I wasn't really looking forward to learning how to really edit video. I can just cut videos up real quick. You know what I mean? I was going to do it because I want to keep doing it in the show, with you and Dan, and we have Ken on sometimes, and maybe we'll get some more guests. But man, I was so excited when you sent this link. I read about it, and then the last couple of days I've actually been able to sit down at night and play with it.
Yeah.
Dude, this is perfect. This is perfect. It's way better than the old interface too.
Yeah. Anybody that's doing this, go out and use StreamCard, give them a 5-star rating. I don't care what they do after this. They're the best in my book.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So
I think next Saturday we'll have Dan.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So we'll be able to test it with 3 people.
Cool. Let's get 6 or 8 and have a total chaos of thought for an hour and a half, and everybody will have to go start drinking at 9 in the morning.
Well, I'll tell you real quick. I'll show you. I don't know if you can see this on your side, but it changes the arrangement of the windows.
Yes.
And I can just click.
Yep. Yeah. No,
perfect.
You can edit out whatever you want. Yeah. No, and I like it. The other thing too is like we've done in the past with and I think this is more efficient. It doesn't, your audible tones don't change the camera speaker. So if somebody coughs while somebody else is talking, it doesn't bring it to the forefront. So no,
that's annoying.
StreamYard, you guys are badasses.
I love this product.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have because with the free version you get the watermark and you're limited to 5 participants. But for $20 a month, I think it's unlimited and it gets rid of the watermark. And dude, I don't know if you saw it when we were talking about the power plant at first. I was able to pop this little banner up. I'll do it again. And it doop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you can create these and just drop them in and out. One click.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Oh man, I'm really excited about this now.
We're gonna exploit this one. This could be bad. So.
Well, for somebody, maybe.
Exactly. All right, my friend. Have a good week. I'm sure I'll talk to you during the week, but have a good Saturday.
You too. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.
Yep.
Cheers.
See you guys.